It seems that it goes against our very nature to stop and relax and to slow down and to be present. But the truth is, it's not against our nature. It's against our programming. We require rest and we require relaxation. And if we don't have it, it catches up on us eventually. And it's normalized in our culture to accept that that's the way things are, that you go into full speed ahead productivity when you're still young and able. And then just before there's absolutely nothing left within you to continue, you will find that the very, very similar story that people get disease in a myriad of ways, but dis-ease all the same. There'll be something in the physical reality of that person that breaks down. And it's no coincidence. And I don't need to go on about that. But the point is, it's ingrained in us that we are to work hard and that having a break is for those who have worked hard enough. And then, of course, the problem is there is no measuring stick for what hard enough is. Often it's beyond any reasonable amount in cultural standards. And so my purpose, my calling, and what feels in full alignment is to be a living example of surrender and moving into the flow state. And when I even say that out loud, it feels so right. And yet I witness in my own life this challenge as very real. And if you look at the theme of most of what I share in my videos, it's the same thing. It's moving out of the preconditioned programming that we are a do, produce, achieve being, and into a new paradigm that we aren't here just to do, but indeed there is a part of this life, a very big part of this life, that is to be enjoyed, to be delighted in, to be pleasurable. And while we're here, we do have the free will choice as to what we place importance on. Once we know about this concept, we can't unknow it. We can't go back into the shadows. And so then it becomes a responsibility to create balance in our lives. Where am I overdoing my life? And when I talk about doing, most of the time, this is when we are allowing our ego or our programming to run the show, to be the master. And so my purpose of being a living example of surrender is about letting go and allowing flow. So allowing the higher self to occupy this living temple and take over as the guidance, intelligence, wisdom, and intuition that is needed to be able to move into flow while still being in a surrendered state. I think it is quite ironic for me in my own life with this struggle. It's been a struggle. However, it is also something that I'm starting to really see and delight in. Now, when we pause and stop in our lives, it can often begin with just a recognition that we were on autopilot. So the very beginning stages of someone's journey into creating balance and awareness is stopping to just take a big deep breath. And that is the beginning phase of moving out of the monkey mind or the small self or the ego or the programming and taking a breather from that control system. And in that moment of pausing and taking a big, deep breath, we find ourselves in the present now moment. So pausing is about stepping out of the perception of time. Time is what keeps us locked in this paradigm of doing. When we pause and move into a place of stillness in that deep breath, we come to a place where there is no past and there is no future. There's just now. Stress and overwhelm, all that pressure to perform, cannot exist in this place of pause, because they both require the ongoing perception of time. Fear of the past repeating itself, fear of the future, anxiety. Stress and overwhelm cannot exist when we are here now. It's really in this here now place that we can truly rest, because we actually give the mind a break. The mind is on pause too. In this pause, it's not just the pause from taking physical action, but it's the pause in giving your mind a chance to be still, stillness. And in this pause, we can experience a re-energization, a reinvigoration, a chance to receive insights, inspiration. It's where we receive our clear guidance, instructions from our higher self. We require the mind to be still to be able to listen to the subtle voice of our higher selves. When we allow this pause and this stillness, our higher selves becomes attuned and our mind can hear the message. Our heart becomes the master in this situation. And the next thought, word, or deed that follows this moment of actual stillness and attunement to our higher selves, these next thoughts, words, and deeds will be based on the heart's truth rather than being filtered through our limited perception or the mind. As we move further into the journey of creating balance between doing and being, or surrender, as we create more and more flow in our life, letting go of the mind's grip on control. So more pauses in the day, more moments of stillness throughout an ordinary day, more and longer periods of this attunement to your higher self through new habit building and new value system of recognizing that this is the most important thing you can do in this life experience and the best skill to master. And so we gradually allow the unfolding of our life without this urgent demand from our small self that is feeling unsafe and insecure by this letting go. It's very scary. As I mentioned, this has been quite a challenge for me. And I'm grateful because there is a trait that I have, which is very stubborn. And I tend to get very focused on what I want to achieve. And this has worked in my favor in this area of my life. I will never give up and I will never concede to the small self. I have become more and more loving to that part of me and accepting, which has created a lot less resistance and fight required for surrender. But I've also seen the evidence of living with surrender. And I've had very real contrast in my life as these two parts of my life come into an equilibrium. I won't go into why this life experience has been challenging, as we all have a programmed set of behaviors that have been created as a reaction to our early circumstances. So I have my own set, you have yours. And these create different disempowering habits and behaviors. So for me, one of mine is this fear of losing control. And it has created a lot of dysregulation in my emotional and mental states many times. As a pattern which I mapped out in my journaling, being quite a methodical person, the personality Melise has always been very methodical and conscientious. What I discovered in that mapping process was this strategy that was disempowering for me around control. And I would always find it immensely important to my own feeling of safety to have everything under control. So in the work that I chose, I would often find myself overwhelmed if the responsibilities and tasks in that role got out of hand and I couldn't stay on top of them. Now, I'm a hard worker and I try to find the most efficient ways of doing things, quite industrious. However, when I would be faced with this workload where it would get beyond the ability for me to control it in a nice package, in a nice working day, I would perceive a pressure. And so control starts this play in my experience. So that I continue to feel safe, I try to create a way to feel safe with control. And I need to get it all done in time. And if you recognize my emphasis on time there, time plays a big part in my programming to be in control, because often it's only when I feel this immense pressure, the pressure only exists because I put it into a time frame. And I often would find that I would be in roles where a manager would also have control issues. Interesting that. And we do attract others like us, like attracts like. We tend to be around those, especially in workplaces, that are like us, that have similar frequencies. And we often have that opportunity to learn something new if we take that as an opportunity. In my situation, I would often have leaders and managers who had control issues too. So the issue there that comes out is micromanagement. And for someone who, such as myself, who has always had a lot of control programming, it's difficult to navigate someone else's control overlaying your control, especially during those moments where you feel the perceived pressure and time crunch. And so this would usually lead me into a strategy of freeze. So you've got fight, flight, freeze, fawn, but I would go into freeze. I would go into a meltdown or a shutdown, because I would feel immense, overwhelmed to the point of complete stop. And I would notice that I would feel the heat rising in my physical body, and I would just feel my mind shut down, and I would be unable to calmly and logically move through each task. And this would create physiological other reactions, including, shaking, sobbing. And you could also call this a panic attack or a meltdown. Now, I had to, as I became more aware and the value to create a better way of being a better strategy, internal strategy for everything that was disempowering me, I started to see this pattern. And I would intervene by the moment that I became aware of the strategy being activated, especially during a work day when I had a huge workload. I would have to force myself to pause and to take a break, because I would be too far gone often to be able to think clearly enough to do my next task. So I would unfortunately leave it to the point of reacting in a very unhealthy way and a very damaging way. It's not good for your body to go through. It's very aging and damaging for your body to go into fight, flight, freeze all the time. And that's what disease is prevalent in our culture, because of we're going into fight, flight, freeze all the time. Our body doesn't have, it needs the balance of stillness, of being, not just doing. And so I've found that the best intervening strategy is to stop and become mindful, which is exactly what I mentioned at the beginning of this. So this is about taking a pause, taking a big deep breath. And often if I found myself in a place where I had just had a meltdown, I would begin to analyze or question what that strategy was. What just happened? What am I feeling? So then we go into shadow work. What is my body doing? I become more and more, and that's why I was able to describe that to you, because I started to become aware of the physiological process. But before that, what was the mental process? What triggered me and moved me into an emotional state of overwhelm? And often the trigger was the perceived workload that was stuck in a perceived time frame. And I don't think I'm isolated in this experience. I think a lot of us go through this, maybe in a smaller, less extreme case, but still we might have these micro moments throughout the day where we feel this pressure, perceived pressure of time and workload. I had to learn to assert my needs as well. I had to actually ask my manager for a break, for a pause, and to actually recognize that this was me asserting my boundaries. This was me often recognizing too late that the boundaries were being crossed because of the physiological reaction, but still at least recognizing that this was an opportunity to recognize the boundary wall here, so that next time or moving forward, each time I can get better at recognizing it before it turns into a meltdown. So I have to implement a new strategy in my life. And this is similar to the last video I did, but probably a more common and recognizable disempowering strategy, and that's to control everything and to, out of this perception that you have to be in control to feel good, to feel safe, you miss out on being here now. And that's the saddest thing ever. I mourn for myself, who's lost all of this opportunity to be here now in the past. But I also have absolutely no regrets, because I am who I am and I've learned what I've learned. And this moment is eternal, so I have plenty more opportunities to be here now. So I'm sharing this to encourage you to make it important. Allowing rest, slow down. Don't make it too late where you've already got to the point of moving into survival mode and shutting down or reacting, exploding, or causing disease. This journey, moving into more and more surrender, has to start with completely reimagining how we have been living in our three-dimensional human experience. It doesn't work anymore to be working all the time. It's often when we actually pause, when we actually step out of the doing and out of our completely zombified state that we actually receive inspiration and guidance. So isn't that worth it? And usually this inspiration or guidance or intelligence or wisdom that comes to you in this moment of being here now in pause is the absolute best solution for your experience to move forward. You couldn't have come up with it with your own limited mind. So let's remember to pause regularly and to attune to our hearts so that we can never get lost in the perception of time, pressure, control. And to me, that is pure truth and freedom. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you liked, please like, share, and subscribe. Have a beautiful day.